I'm Ramona Norman, 32, and until 6 months ago, I was just the disappointing daughter-in-law who married above her station. At every family dinner, Marcus's parents made sure I knew I wasn't enough, not educated enough, not polished enough, certainly not worthy of their precious son. The whispered comments, the pointed suggestions about more suitable matches, the way they'd introduce me as Marcus's friend even after 3 years of marriage. But last Tuesday, when Forbes magazine called to inform me I'd been named CEO of the Year for revolutionizing sustainable packaging, something shifted. The same woman they dismissed as a craft store manager had quietly built a multi-million-dollar empire while they weren't paying attention. Now they're calling every day, suddenly interested in getting to know me better. What they don't know is that I've been keeping score all along, and the reckoning is just beginning. If you've ever been underestimated by family, subscribe because this story is about to get very interesting. Asterisk, I still remember the first time I met Marcus's family. It was at his cousin's wedding 3 years ago, and I thought I looked beautiful in my navy dress, the most expensive thing I owned at the time. Marcus squeezed my hand as we walked into the country club, whispering that I looked perfect. His mother, Eleanor, glided over in her cream silk ensemble, her smile as polished as her pearl necklace. "So you must be the girl Marcus has been telling us about," she said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. Not woman, girl. As if I were some teenage infatuation rather than a 29-year-old college graduate. "Mom, this is Ramona," Marcus said, proudly. Ramona, my mother Eleanor, and my father Robert. Robert barely looked up from his phone. "Pleasure," he mumbled, already turning away to greet someone more important. Eleanor's smile never wavered, but her eyes grew cold. "What a lovely ... dress, very affordable looking." "Where did you say you work again?" "I manage the creativity corner downtown," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a craft and art supply store." "Oh." The single syllable carried the weight of her disappointment. "How ... quaint. And you went to school where?" "State University. I have a degree in business management. State school." She said it like I'd admitted to serving time. "Well, isn't that nice?" Throughout the evening, I watched her work the room with practiced ease, introducing everyone to our Marcus, but somehow managing to position herself between us whenever someone approached. When the photographer came for family photos, she guided me to the very edge of the group, her hand firm on my elbow. "Just step back a tiny bit, dear," she cooed. "We want to make sure everyone fits." In the final photo, I'm barely visible, half hidden behind Marcus's broad shoulders. His sister Jessica stands prominently in the center, her arm linked with their mother's, both of them beaming. I look like an afterthought, an accidental inclusion. Later, when Marcus went to get us drinks, Eleanor cornered me by the dessert table. "You seem like a sweet girl, Ramona," she said, her voice honey smooth. "But I hope you understand that Marcus has ... expectations. He's destined for great things. Partnership at his law firm, a house in Oakwood Heights, the right kind of social circle." Her meaning was crystal clear. I wasn't the right kind of anything. "I love Marcus for who he is," I said quietly, "not for what he might achieve." She laughed, a tinkling sound that somehow managed to be cutting. "Oh, sweetheart, love is wonderful, but it's not enough. Not for someone like Marcus. He needs a partner who can match his ambitions, his background, someone who can enhance his future, not..." She paused, letting her eyes drift over me again. "Well, I'm sure you understand." That night, lying in Marcus's apartment, I stared at the wedding photo he'd proudly placed on his nightstand. Even in the dim light, I could see how I looked pushed. Aside, diminished, almost erased. "Your mother doesn't like me," I whispered. Marcus was already half asleep. "She just needs time to get to know you. She'd come around." But I knew better. Eleanor hadn't been evaluating whether she liked me. She'd been calculating exactly how to get rid of me. The morning after that wedding, I woke up with a strange sense of determination. Eleanor's dismissal had stung, but it also lit something inside me, a quiet fire that refused to be extinguished by her polished condescension. I'd always been drawn to creating things with my hands. Even as a child, while other kids watched cartoons, I was weaving friendship bracelets or painting rocks I'd found in our backyard. My mother used to joke that I could make something beautiful out of absolutely nothing, a skill born from necessity in our cash-strapped household. After college, I'd taken the management job at Creativity Corner because it felt like home among the art supplies and craft materials. But watching the customers, seeing their frustration with environmentally harmful products, I began to notice a gap in the market that nobody seemed to be addressing. Why is everything either beautiful or sustainable, but never both? I asked my assistant manager, Carol, one Tuesday afternoon as we unpacked a shipment of plastic beads that would outlive us all. Because green usually means expensive and ugly, she said pragmatically. People want pretty and cheap, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That weekend, I spent hours in my tiny apartment kitchen, experimenting with natural materials. Cornstarch, vegetable glycerin, natural dyes from beets and turmeric. I was trying to create a biodegradable crafting, material that didn't look like it belonged in a health food store. Marcus found me at my kitchen table at 2 a.m., surrounded by small containers of colorful, putty-like substances. What's all this? He asked, rubbing his eyes. I think I figured out how to make craft clay that completely biodegrades in soil within 6 months, I said excitedly. Look! I showed him 2 samples. One I'd buried in a flower pot 3 weeks earlier had already begun breaking down. Wow. Traditional polymer clay from the store remained unchanged. He picked up one of my samples, rolling it between his fingers. It feels just like the real thing. Better, I said. And it costs about the same to produce. Marcus, I think this could be something big. He smiled indulgently. That's great, honey. Maybe you could sell some at the store. But I was already thinking bigger. That night, I filed for my first business license, Ramona's Eco Crafts. The name felt presumptuous written on the official forms, but something deep inside me insisted this was right. The next few months were a whirlwind of late nights and small experiments. I converted our spare bedroom into a laboratory of sorts, much to Marcus's mild annoyance. Every surface was covered with samples, test batches, and notebooks filled with formulations. The apartment smells like a chemistry lab, he complained one evening. I'm perfecting the formula, I said, not looking up from my work. I think I can create an entire line biodegradable paints, sustainable glues, even eco-friendly glitter. Glitter? Made from plant cellulose. It sparkles just as much but dissolves completely in water. At the family's monthly dinner the following Sunday, I made the mistake of mentioning my project. How adorable, Eleanor said, cutting her salmon with surgical precision. Marcus, did you know your wife is playing scientist in your spare room? She's actually onto something interesting, Mom, Marcus said, though his tone was more apologetic than proud. She's developing environmentally friendly craft supplies. Robert looked up from his plate. Is there money in that? Well, I'm still in the development phase, so no money yet, he interrupted. Marcus' son, perhaps Ramona's energy would be better spent on more practical pursuits. Volunteer work, perhaps. Charity committees. Things that would benefit your career. Jessica, Marcus's sister, laughed. Remember when I went through my pottery phase? Thank God David talked sense into me before I embarrassed myself trying to. Sell ashtrays at craft fairs. The table erupted in laughter. Everyone except Marcus, who stared at his plate, and me, feeling my cheeks burn with humiliation. I'm not making ashtrays, I said quietly. Of course not, dear, Eleanor said with false kindness. I'm sure whatever you're making is very creative. It's sweet that you have a little hobby. Hobby? The word hit me like a slap. This wasn't a hobby, this was the beginning of something revolutionary. But looking around that table at their amused, dismissive faces, I realized that explaining wouldn't matter. They already decided what I was worth. That night, I sat in my laboratory, holding the business license I'd framed and hung on the wall, Ramona's Eco Crafts. In just 3 months, I developed 5 different sustainable craft materials. I had detailed cost analyses, market research, and a growing folder of potential customers who'd expressed interest. But to Marcus's family, I was just the girl from the craft store playing with kitchen chemistry. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, seeing not the dismissed daughter-in-law they labeled me as, but the entrepreneur I was becoming. They could keep their condescension. I had work to do. The monthly family dinners became my personal gauntlet. Every first Sunday, we'd gather around Eleanor's dining room table, a mahogany monument to tradition that had been in the family for 3 generations. I'd learned to dread the ritual, but Marcus insisted we attend. "It's important to my parents," he'd say, straightening his tie in our hallway mirror. "And it's not that bad." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one being systematically dissected with surgical precision. The worst dinner happened in November. 6 months into my product development, I'd made the mistake of arriving slightly late because I'd been on a call with a potential distributor, a conversation that could have changed everything. But they didn't know that. "Ramona, darling," Eleanor said as Marcus and I slipped into our usual seats. "How thoughtful of you to join us eventually." "I'm sorry." I was handling some business. Business? Robert's eyebrows shot up. The craft store had an emergency? Jessica snorted into her wine glass. What kind of emergency? Someone ran out of popsicle sticks. The table tittered with laughter. I felt my face burn but forced myself to stay calm. Actually, I was speaking with a potential distributor about my product line. Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Product line?" "Marcus, you didn't mention Ramona was still playing with her little science experiment." "It's not an experiment," I said, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. "I've developed a complete range of biodegradable craft materials. The distributor is interested in carrying them in over 200 stores across the region." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Robert began to chuckle. 200 stores? "Ramona, sweetheart, do you have any idea what it takes to supply that kind of operation? Manufacturing facilities, quality control, shipping logistics, insurance?" He shook his head patronizingly. "This isn't like mixing paint in your kitchen." I understand the challenges, do you?" Eleanor's voice was razor sharp now. "Because, from where I sit, it looks like you're living in a fantasy while your husband supports your little hobby. Marcus works 60-hour weeks at a prestigious law firm while you play inventor." Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Mom, that's not fair. Ramona works full-time at the store too." "Part-time craft retail," Jessica corrected. "Hardly a career." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, hands trembling slightly as I opened my voice recorder app. Something told me I might need evidence of this moment someday. "You know what I think?" Eleanor continued, warming to her theme. "I think this whole business fantasy is Ramona's way of avoiding reality, real responsibility. Marcus needs a wife. Who can be a true partner? Someone who can host his colleagues, support his ambitions, maybe give us grandchildren instead of biodegradable glitter." The last words hit like physical blows. I'd been trying to get pregnant for 8 months, something Eleanor somehow knew despite us never discussing it. Marcus must have told her. "Eleanor," Marcus said weakly, "that's enough." "Is it? Your father and I have been patient, Marcus. We welcomed Ramona into this family despite," she gestured vaguely at me, "despite everything. But this ridiculous business pretense is embarrassing. What will people think when they hear that Marcus Norman's wife is peddling craft supplies door to door?" "I'm not peddling anything door to door," I said quietly. "I'm building a sustainable manufacturing company that could revolutionize the craft industry." Robert's laughter was harsh. "Revolutionize the craft industry? Ramona, you work in a strip mall store. You have no manufacturing experience, no business connections, no capital. This is pure delusion." "Maybe," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "it's time we discuss this more seriously. Marcus, your promotion to senior associate is coming up. The partners notice these things, what kind of wife you have, how she reflects on your judgment." The threat was clear. My continued existence in Marcus's life was a liability to his career. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." In Eleanor's pristine powder room, I stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror. My face was flushed, my eyes bright with unshed tears. But underneath the hurt, I could see something else growing, a cold, determined anger. I looked down at my phone, still recording. 23 minutes of pure, documented condescension. Their voices were crystal clear, every cutting word preserved. When I returned to the table, the conversation had moved on to Jessica's upcoming vacation to the Hamptons. I ate the rest of my dinner in silence, mechanically chewing the expensive food that tasted like sawdust. As we were leaving, Eleanor walked us to the door with her usual gracious smile. "Ramona, darling," she said, placing a manicured hand on my arm. "I hope you understand that everything we discussed tonight comes from a place of love. We just want what's best for Marcus." I looked directly into her eyes. "I understand perfectly. Eleanor, you've made your position very clear." In the car, Marcus was quiet for several blocks before finally speaking. "They're just worried about us, about our future." "No, Marcus. They're worried about your future. There's a difference." He didn't respond, and I stared out the window at the expensive houses in his parents' neighborhood. Behind their perfect facades, I wondered how many other family dinners like this were happening. How many other women were being slowly, systematically erased. But I had something they didn't know about yet. I had my phone recording 23 minutes of evidence that would someday remind me exactly why I'd been justified in keeping my success secret, and I had a meeting with that distributor. On Tuesday, a meeting that was going to change everything. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in December, born from frustration and a shipping disaster at the store. We'd received a delivery of craft supplies packaged in those horrible plastic clamshells that required industrial tools to open and would persist in landfills for centuries. "This is insane," I muttered to Carol as we wrestled with package after package. "Why does everything have to be wrapped in eternal plastic?" "Because it's cheap and protects the products," she said, pragmatically, finally succeeding in freeing a set of paintbrushes. But I couldn't let it go. That evening, instead of working on my biodegradable craft materials, I found myself staring at the mountain of discarded packaging from our shipment. Thick, rigid plastic that would outlive my great-grandchildren, all to protect products that would be used once and forgotten. What if I could solve both problems at once? I spent the next 3 days researching packaging technologies, material sciences, and biodegradation processes. The deeper I dug, the more excited I became. The packaging industry was worth hundreds of billions globally, but it was still stuck. In the environmental dark ages, my eureka moment came while watching a documentary about mushroom cultivation. The narrator mentioned mycelium, the root structure of mushrooms, and how it could be grown into specific shapes and densities. Something clicked. I started small, growing mycelium in controlled conditions in my spare room. Within weeks, I had samples that were sturdy enough to protect fragile items but would completely decompose in soil within 90 days. Unlike traditional biodegradable options that only broke down in industrial composting facilities, my material degraded in regular backyard compost. But the real innovation came when I figured out how to combine it with my plant-based polymers. The result was packaging that was not only biodegradable but actually beneficial to soil. It released nutrients as it decomposed. I worked feverishly for 2 months, perfecting the formula and testing different applications. By February, I had created packaging that could replace plastic clamshells, bubble wrap, foam inserts, and even shipping boxes. The material was lightweight, protective, completely customizable, and it would turn into fertilizer after use. The night I completed my successful prototype, I sat in my makeshift laboratory, holding a perfectly formed protective case that had housed a delicate glass ornament during drop tests. In 3 months, I could bury this same case in my garden, and it would nourish my tomatoes. I knew I was holding the future. The next morning, I called in sick to the craft store and drove 2 hours to the patent office. Filing the paperwork felt surreal, pages and pages of technical specifications that represented months of sleepless nights and countless failed experiments. "Revolutionary biodegradable protective packaging system," I wrote in the title field. The clerk who processed my application was a tired-looking woman who'd probably seen thousands of hopeful inventors. "How long does the process usually take?" I asked. 18 months to 2 years for full approval," she said without looking up. But you'll get a provisional patent number today that protects your filing date. I walked out of that building with a receipt and a number that changed everything. Provisional patent application number 62,847,293. I had legal protection for my innovation. And more importantly, I had proof that this was real. That evening, I called 3 packaging industry contacts I'd found through trade publications. The conversations were identical polite interests that turned to genuine excitement once they understood what I'd developed. You're telling me this material provides the same protection as rigid plastic but composts in home systems? Asked Dr. Sarah Chan from Pacific Packaging Solutions. Better protection in many cases. And it releases nitrogen and phosphorus as it decomposes, actually improving soil quality. The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Ms. Norman, would you be available for a meeting next week? I'd like to see this material in person. By the end of the week, I had scheduled meetings with 5 major packaging companies and 2 environmental consulting firms. Each conversation revealed just how massive this opportunity was, but I told no one. Not Carol at the store, not my friends, and certainly not Marcus Stott. The closest I came was the night Marcus found me at my laptop, researching manufacturing equipment prices. "What are you working on?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Just some business research," I said, quickly minimizing the window showing industrial mycelium cultivation systems. "For the craft materials, something like that." He kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you for pursuing this, you know, even if my family doesn't understand." I leaned back against him, feeling the weight of my secret. Part of me wanted to tell him everything about the patent, the meetings, the potential that was keeping me awake at night with excitement. But I remembered Eleanor's voice. This ridiculous business pretense is embarrassing. They thought I was playing. They had no idea I was about to change an entire industry. "Marcus," I said quietly, "what would you do if you discovered you'd been completely wrong about someone?" "What do you mean?" "If you found out that someone you underestimated was actually more than you realized?" He was quiet for a moment. "I guess I'd be grateful for the chance to see them clearly." I hoped that was true, because very soon, everyone was going to see me clearly for the first time. The first major contract arrived on a Thursday morning in March, delivered by certified mail to the craft store. The envelope was thick, official, and addressed to Ramona Norman, CEO, Eco Innovation Solutions. I'd changed my business name to something that sounded more serious than Ramona's Eco Crafts. Though I kept that as a subsidiary, Carol raised an eyebrow as I signed for the package. "See, just some paperwork," I said casually, but my hands were shaking as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a signed contract with Megacorp Retail, one of the largest big box store chains in the country. They wanted to pilot my biodegradable packaging for their electronics division across 150 stores, with an option to expand nationwide if the test was successful. The contract value, $2.3 million. For the first year alone, I excused myself to the back office and read the document 3 times before the numbers sank in. They weren't just buying my packaging, they were buying my vision of a sustainable future. The contract included performance bonuses, exclusivity clauses, and a timeline that would require me to scale production immediately. That afternoon, I drove to an industrial district on the outskirts of town and toured a 15,000 square foot warehouse that had been sitting empty for 2 years. The rent was reasonable, the space was perfect for mycelium cultivation, and the loading docks could handle the truck deliveries I'd soon need. "When would you need to take possession?" asked the leasing agent. "Immediately," I said, signing the lease application on the spot. Within 2 weeks, I'd hired my first 3 employees. Dr. Maria Santos, a biochemist who specialized in fungal cultivation. James Wright, a former packaging engineer from a major manufacturer. And Lisa Park, a recent business school graduate who became my operations manager. "You realize this is going to be huge," Maria said during our first team meeting in the empty warehouse. "The applications for this technology go way beyond craft supplies." She was right. As word spread quietly through industry networks, inquiries started pouring in. Food packaging companies wanted samples. Electronics manufacturers were interested in protective foam alternatives. Even the automotive industry reached out about biodegradable shipping materials. I opened a business banking account at a different bank than Marcus and I used for personal finances. Within 3 months, the account showed deposits that would have made his lawyer's salary look modest. But I kept working at the craft store, maintaining the illusion of my simple life. The hardest part was the physical exhaustion. My days started at 6 a.m. at the warehouse, overseeing production and meeting with potential clients. Then I'd rush to the craft store for my afternoon shift, pretending to care about inventory shortages and customer complaints about the price of scrapbook paper. Evenings were spent on conference calls with distributors on the West Coast, or reviewing product development reports. Marcus began to notice my fatigue. "You seem stressed lately," he said one evening as I fell asleep over my laptop. "Just busy at the store. We're doing inventory." He accepted the explanation because it fit his mental image of me, the craft store manager whose biggest challenge was counting packages of stickers by summer. I had contracts with 12 major retailers and 2 international distributors. My team had grown to 15 employees, and we were operating in 2 shifts to meet demand. The warehouse that had seemed impossibly large 6 months earlier was already running out of space. The breakthrough moment came when Dr. Santos perfected our second-generation formula. The new material wasn't just biodegradable, it was actively beneficial to the environment, creating rich compost that improved soil quality. We filed for 3 additional patents and began developing specialized applications for medical packaging and agricultural use. "Ramona," Lisa said during our weekly operations meeting, "we need to talk about expansion. We're getting inquiries from Europe and Asia. The demand is unprecedented." I looked around the conference room I'd built in the corner of our warehouse. 6 months ago, this had been an empty concrete shell. Now it housed a company that was revolutionizing an industry. What kind of expansion are we talking about? Conservative estimates? We could be looking at $50 million in revenue within 2 years. Aggressive growth? Over $100 million. The numbers were staggering. I was building something that could fundamentally change how the world thought about packaging. And I was doing it while Marcus's family still saw me as the girl who managed. At craft store that evening, I sat in my car in our apartment complex parking lot, staring at a bank statement that showed $8.7 million in business accounts. Money I earned by solving a problem the packaging industry had ignored for decades. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Looking forward to seeing you both at Sunday dinner. I've invited the Hendersons Roberts, thinking about recommending Marcus for junior partner." I stared at the message, remembering her words from that November dinner. "This ridiculous business pretense is embarrassing." She was still treating me like a charity case, someone Marcus had to apologize for. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious. What would Eleanor's face look like when she discovered that the woman she dismissed was now worth more than her husband's entire law practice? What would Robert say when he learned that my little science experiment was attracting interest from Fortune 500 companies? I thought about the Forbes journalist who'd been calling for weeks, wanting to feature innovative entrepreneurs in their annual CEO spotlight. I'd been putting him off, claiming I needed more time to prepare. But maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to let them see exactly who Ramona Norman really was. The craft store could survive without me. My real business was ready to stand in the spotlight. All I had to do was decide when to flip the switch. The cruelest moment came at the Hendersons' anniversary party in August. Eleanor had insisted we attend. "It's important for Marcus's career," she'd said, and I'd agreed, still playing the role of the compliant daughter-in-law. The party was held at the country club where I'd first met the family, the same venue where that telling wedding photo had been taken. I wore a new dress, emerald green silk that I'd bought with money from my first quarterly profit distribution. It cost more than I used to make in a month at the craft store, but of course, they couldn't know that. "Ramona, darling," Eleanor swept over as soon as we arrived. "How lovely. That's a beautiful dress, very bold color choice." Everything was an insult with Eleanor, even compliments. The evening started predictably. I smiled and nodded through conversations about golf handicaps and vacation homes, while Eleanor periodically steered people away from me with practiced social choreography. I was the family member to be managed, minimized, contained, but then Margaret Henderson, the guest of honor, approached our table. "Eleanor, you must introduce me to Marcus's wife." "I've been dying to meet her." Eleanor's smile tightened imperceptibly. "Of course, Margaret, this is Ramona. Ramona Margaret Henderson. She's on the board of the Children's Hospital Foundation." "How?" "Wonderful to finally meet you," Margaret said warmly. "I've heard so much about your business ventures." I froze. How could she possibly know about my company? Eleanor's confusion was visible. "Business ventures?" Margaret laughed. "Oh, don't be modest, Eleanor. The whole environmental innovation thing is fascinating. My daughter works in procurement for Megacorp, and she mentioned they're piloting some revolutionary packaging technology from a local company. Eco Innovation Solutions, I think." She said the CEO is some kind of genius. The blood drained from Eleanor's face. Marcus looked confused, glancing between Margaret and me. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said carefully, "but I think there's been some confusion. Ramona manages a craft store." "Well, yes, I'm sure she does many things," Margaret continued, oblivious to the tension she created. "But the company my daughter was raving about biodegradable packaging that actually improves soil quality, that's absolutely brilliant. She said they're looking at a nationwide rollout." I could feel Eleanor's eyes boring into me, but I kept my expression neutral. "That does sound interesting," I said mildly. Margaret turned to me directly. "You're in the craft business, right? You must know about these kinds of innovations." "It's exactly the sort of thing that could revolutionize retail packaging." Before I could respond, Eleanor stood abruptly. "Ramona, could I speak with you privately? There's something I need to discuss." Her grip on my arm was firm as she guided me away from the table, through the party crowd and out onto the club's terrace. The August night was humid, but Eleanor's expression was ice cold. "What?" she said quietly. "Was Margaret talking about?" "I have no idea. You heard her, she was talking about some company." "Don't lie to me, Ramona. I can see it in your face." Eleanor stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Have you been embarrassing this family with some ridiculous business scheme behind our backs? I don't know what you mean." "Oh, I think you do." Eleanor's composure was cracking. "Margaret Henderson doesn't make mistakes about business connections. If she thinks you're involved with some packaging company, then you've been lying to all of us." She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "What are you doing?" "Calling my friend, Linda. Her husband works in industrial procurement. If there's some local company making waves in packaging, he'll know about it." My heart hammered as Eleanor made the call, stepping to the edge of the terrace for privacy. I could see her through the glass doors, her animated gestures and increasingly shocked expression. When she returned, her face was white with fury. "Eco Innovation Solutions," she said slowly. 15 employees. Multi-million-dollar contracts. Revolutionary biodegradable packaging technology. She paused. "Run by a CEO named Ramona Norman." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "You lying, manipulative little bitch," Eleanor whispered, her polished facade finally cracking completely. "You've been playing us for fools this entire time." "Eleanor, don't. Just don't." She was shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Margaret Henderson will tell everyone about this conversation. By tomorrow, half the city will know that Marcus's wife has been lying about running some company." "I never lied. I just didn't. You made us look like idiots." Her voice rose dangerously. "All those dinners, all that sympathy for your little craft store job, all that patience with your pathetic attempts to fit into this family, and you were running a business worth millions?" I could see party guests starting to notice our confrontation. Through the windows, double quotes Eleanor, "Please keep your voice down." "No, I will not keep my voice down. You want to know what I think? I think you're a manipulative gold digger who planned this from the beginning. You married Marcus for his connections. used our family name to build your business, and then humiliated us by keeping it secret. That's not true, isn't it? How convenient that you chose packaging technology, something that would appeal to Robert's corporate contacts. How convenient that you waited until Marcus was up for partner to reveal your success. This was all calculated, wasn't it? Her accusations were so far from the truth, they were almost laughable. But looking at her face, twisted with fury and humiliation, I realized that the truth didn't matter. She needed someone to blame for her own miscalculation, and I was the perfect target. You're wrong about everything, I said quietly. Am I? Well, let me tell you something, you little schemer. This ends now. I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't let you destroy my son's reputation with your lies and manipulation. She turned to go back inside, then paused. And Ramona? If you think this changes anything, if you think money makes you worthy of this family, you're sadly mistaken. You're still the same pathetic girl from the craft store. You'll always be beneath US no matter how much money you stumble into. I watched her walk away, her posture rigid with wounded pride. Through the glass doors, I could see her rejoining Marcus at their table, leaning close to whisper urgently in his ear. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and opened my recording app. Time to document another conversation. Something told me I was going to need evidence of this night for a very long time. The war had officially begun. After Eleanor's explosive confrontation at the Henderson party, I stopped pretending to be small. Not publicly that revelation would come on my terms, but privately. I embraced the magnitude of what I built. The quarterly financial report that arrived in September painted a picture that still took my breath away. Eco Innovation Solutions had generated $12.4 million in revenue in just 8 months of operation. Our profit margins were extraordinary because we'd solved a problem that had plagued an entire industry for decades, but the numbers only told part of the story. My technology had caught the attention of international markets. The European Union, with its strict environmental regulations, was desperate for packaging solutions that met their sustainability requirements. I'd received inquiries from companies in Germany, France, and the Netherlands, all wanting to license. And my biodegradable packaging system. Dr. Santos had perfected our third-generation formula, which could be customized for specific applications. We now produce different grades of packaging for electronics, food service, pharmaceuticals, and automotive parts. Each variant was optimized for its intended use while maintaining our core promise complete: biodegradation within 90 days. Ramona, James Wright said during our Monday morning production meeting, we need to talk about capacity. We're operating at 110% of our designed output, and we're still turning away orders. I looked around the conference table at my team. In less than a year, I'd gone from working alone in my apartment kitchen to managing 15 full-time employees and running a company that occupied 2 warehouses. What are our options? We could lease the warehouse next door, Lisa suggested. It would triple our production space and allow us to install the new cultivation systems Dr. Santos designed. Cost? Initial setup would be about $2 million, but it would increase our capacity to handle $50 million in annual revenue. $50 million? A year ago, I'd been proud to manage a craft store with annual sales of $300,000. Do it? I said. What else? Maria leaned forward. We've had an interesting inquiry from Japan. Sony wants to discuss using our materials for consumer electronics, packaging across Asia. They're talking about a 5-year contract worth over $100 million. The room fell silent. Even for a company growing as rapidly as ours, those numbers were staggering. There's something else, Lisa said quietly. Forbes magazine has been calling. They want to interview you for their annual CEOs to Watch feature. I'd been avoiding the Forbes journalists for months, but perhaps it was time to stop hiding. The secret was becoming harder to maintain anyway, especially after Eleanor's discovery at the Henderson party. Set up the interview, I decided, but not until after we closed the Sony deal. That afternoon, I drove to my personal bank, not the one where Marcus and I kept our joint checking account, but the private wealth management firm where I'd moved my business profits. My personal banker, Patricia Wong, greeted me with the kind of deference I was still getting used to. Ms. Norman, perfect timing. Your quarterly statement is ready for review. She led me to a private conference room where my financial portfolio was laid out in pristine charts and graphs. The numbers were almost abstract $8.7 million in liquid assets, plus equity in a company valued at over $25 million. Your diversification strategy is working beautifully, Patricia said. We've invested in sustainable technology funds that align with your business philosophy, plus some traditional blue chip stocks for stability. I stare at the charts showing my net worth trajectory. The line climbed steeply from 18 months ago to numbers that made me a millionaire several times over. There's one more thing, Patricia said, sliding another document across the table. Given your company's rapid growth and the international interest, we should discuss succession planning and asset protection. Have you considered establishing a family trust? Family. The word felt loaded with irony. Marcus still thought I worked part-time at a craft store. His parents believed I was an embarrassment to their social circle. They had no idea that I now had more liquid assets than Robert's. Entire law practice. Let me think about it, I said, gathering the papers. That evening, Marcus found me in our home office, reviewing contracts for our expansion into the Canadian market. You're working late again, he said, massaging my shoulders. The craft store is really keeping you busy. I almost laughed. If only he knew that the craft store was now a cover story I maintained purely for his family's benefit. Something like that, I said, minimizing the window showing a purchase order for $3.2 million from a Quebec-based retailer. I've been thinking, Marcus continued. Maybe it's time we looked at buying a house. A real house, not this apartment. I'm probably getting the promotion to senior associate next month, and we could qualify for a decent mortgage. I turned to look at him, this man I loved who still had no idea who I really was. He was talking about mortgages while I had enough cash to buy most houses outright. Where were you thinking? Maybe something in Maple Heights? 3 bedrooms, nice neighborhood? We could start trying for kids in a more serious way. Maple Heights was a middle-class suburb where young professionals bought starter homes. Nice enough, but a far cry from the exclusive neighborhoods where I could now afford to live. Marcus, I said carefully, what if we could afford something bigger? He laughed. On my salary plus your part-time income? Let's be realistic, honey. Maybe in 10 years after I make partner. I almost told him everything right then. The words were on my tongue about the patents, the international contracts, the Forbes interview. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of Eleanor's cruel accusations, or the way his family had systematically dismissed every ambitious thought I'd ever expressed. You're right, I said instead. Let's look at Maple Heights. The next morning I received a call that changed my perspective entirely. Ms. Norman? This is David Chun from the United Nations Environmental Program. We've been following your work in biodegradable packaging technology, and we'd like to discuss a potential partnership. The UN wanted to pilot my packaging system for their global relief operations. Food aid, medical supplies, emergency housing. Materials all packaged in materials that would enrich soil rather than pollute it after use. The environmental impact could be transformative, David explained. We're talking about millions of tons of packaging annually across our operations in developing countries. After the call, I sat in my warehouse office, looking out at the production floor where my team was creating materials that could help feed hungry people while healing damaged ecosystems. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a mission. Picked up my phone and called the Forbes journalist. Michael Patterson. He answered. Mr. Patterson, this is Ramona Norman from Eco Innovation Solutions. I'm ready for that interview. There was a pause. Excellent. I've been researching your company, and I have to say, what you've accomplished is remarkable. When would you be available? As soon as possible, I said. I think it's time the world knew what we're building here. As I hung up, I thought about Marcus's mortgage conversations and Eleanor's accusations of manipulation. Soon, none of that would matter. Soon, everyone would see exactly who Ramona Norman had become. The question was whether the people I loved would be proud of what I'd achieved, or resent me for keeping it secret for so long. The tension in our marriage became impossible to ignore after Eleanor discovered my secret. Marcus started asking questions probing questions that revealed how much his mother had told him. "Honey," he said one evening as I reviewed production schedules at our kitchen table, "my mom mentioned something interesting at dinner last week." I didn't look up from my laptop. "Oh," she said, "Margaret Henderson thinks you're involved with some packaging company. Eco something solutions?" My fingers paused over the keyboard. "Margaret Henderson says a lot of things. But you're not involved with any packaging company, right? I mean, beyond ordering supplies for the craft store." The question hung in the air between us. This was my chance to tell him everything about the patents, the millions in revenue, the international expansion. But looking at his face, I could see the hope there. Hope that his mother was wrong, that I was still the simple craft store manager he'd married. "Marcus, would it matter if I was? What do you mean?" "I mean, would it change how you feel about me if I was more successful than you realized?" He was quiet for a long moment. "That's a strange question, Ramona." "Of course it wouldn't change. How I feel about you. I love you no matter what." But there was something in his voice. Hesitation that suggested the reality might be more complicated. The breaking point came when Marcus suggested we start marriage counseling. "I just think we could use some help communicating," he said. "Things have felt different lately." Different. That was one way to put it. I was running a multi-million-dollar company while he believed. I arranged craft supplies for soccer moms. Dr. Rebecca Martinez was a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in helping couples through life transitions. Her office was decorated with calming earth tones and inspirational quotes about communication and growth. "What brings you both here today?" she asked during our first session. Marcus answered first. "I feel like Ramona and I aren't being completely honest with each other, like we're keeping secrets." Dr. Martinez looked at me. "Ramona, how do you feel about that?" I considered my words carefully. "I think sometimes people keep parts of themselves private because they're not sure how those parts will be received. Can you give me an example?" I glanced at Marcus, who was watching me intently. What if someone in a relationship achieved something significant, but they were afraid their partner's family would see it as threatening or inappropriate? Are we talking hypothetically, or is this something you're experiencing? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Ramona, what are you talking about?" This was it. The moment I could either continue the charade or trust the man I married with the truth. "I'm talking about the fact that I've built a successful business, but I've been keeping it quiet because your family has made it very clear they don't think I'm capable of success." The silence in the room was deafening. "What kind of business?" Marcus asked quietly. "Biodegradable packaging technology. I hold patents on materials that could revolutionize the packaging industry. I have employees, international contracts, and revenue in the millions." Marcus stared at me like I'd announced I was an alien. "Millions?" "Yes." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "Marcus, how are you feeling about this revelation?" I'm feeling confused. "Ramona, why didn't you tell me?" "Because every time I mention my business ideas, your family treated them like a joke. Because your mother called my work a ridiculous business pretense that was embarrassing to your career. Because I learned that being successful was somehow threatening to everyone around me." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "But millions? Ramona, you're talking about millions of dollars, and you never said anything? Would you have believed me if I had?" The question hit its mark. Marcus looked uncomfortable, which was answer enough. "This is double quotes." He struggled for words. "This is huge. This changes everything." "Does it? How?" "Well, for starters, we don't need to worry about mortgage or my promotion or..." He stopped, realizing what he was saying. "I mean, this is incredible. You're incredible. I just don't understand why you felt you had to hide it." Dr. Martinez intervened gently. "Marcus, it sounds like Ramona felt she needed to protect this part of herself. Can you understand why she might have felt that way?" "I guess, but..." He turned to me. "My family can be difficult, but they're not monsters. They would have been proud of your success." I almost laughed. Marcus, your mother accused me of being a gold digger and a manipulator when she found out about the company. She said I was using your family name to build my business and that I'd always be beneath you no matter how much money I made. His face went pale. She said that at the Henderson party. She also said this was all calculated to coincide with your promotion, that I was somehow trying to damage your reputation. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. I need to talk to her, he said finally. Double quotes. No, Marcus. You need to decide where your loyalty lies, with me or with a family that has spent 3 years trying to convince you that you married beneath your station. Dr. Martinez watched us both carefully. This seems like a pivotal moment in your relationship. Marcus, Ramona has shared something very significant with you, not just about her business success, but about how she's felt treated by your family. How do you want to respond? Marcus looked torn, caught between the woman he loved and the family who'd raised him. I want to support you, Ramona, I do, but they're my family. They raised me, they love me, and they've been systematically undermining your wife for 3 years. I finished. Marcus, I don't need you to choose between us, but I need you to choose to protect our marriage. I need you to set boundaries with people who treat me like I'm not good enough for you. He nodded slowly. You're right. You're absolutely right. I've been passive about their behavior, and that's not fair to you. The question is, Dr. Martinez said gently, what are you both going to do moving forward? I looked at Marcus, this man I loved who was finally seeing the full picture of our relationship dynamics. I'm going to stop hiding who I am, I said. I have a Forbes interview next week. The whole world is going to know about my company. Marcus's eyes widened. Forbes? CEO of the Year feature. The journalist says what I've built is revolutionary. He stared at me with a mixture of awe and bewilderment, as if he was seeing me clearly for the first time. My wife, he said slowly, is going to be on the cover of Forbes magazine. Probably. He leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. And my family has been treating you like you're not good enough for me. Yes, for the first time in our marriage, I saw real anger flash across Marcus's face, not at me, but at the situation we'd all created. They're going to feel pretty stupid when that magazine comes out, he said quietly. I reached for his hand. The question is, how are you going to feel? Michael Patterson from Forbes was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the slick, aggressive journalist I'd imagined, he was a soft-spoken man in his 40s who approached business storytelling like an anthropologist studying fascinating cultures. Ms. Norman, he said as we sat in my warehouse conference room, I have to admit, your company has been one of the most intriguing discoveries in my 15 years covering emerging businesses. He spread a folder of documents across the conference. Table printouts of patent filings, industry reports, financial analyses that made my company look even more impressive than I realized. Where did you get all this? I asked. Research is what separates good business journalism from press releases disguised as articles, he said with a smile. I've spent 3 months investigating eco-innovation solutions and the story I'm finding. It is remarkable. He opened his laptop and pulled up a detailed spreadsheet. Your company has achieved something unprecedented. You've created a completely new market category while solving multiple environmental and economic problems simultaneously. I'm not sure I follow. Look at these numbers, he said, pointing to his screen. Traditional packaging companies spend decades trying to increase market share by fractions of a percentage point. You've created demand for a product that didn't exist 2 years ago, and you're already capturing industrial clients who are switching from established suppliers. Michael pulled out another document. I spoke with Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the Environmental Protection Agency. She says your biodegradable packaging technology could reduce industrial packaging waste by up to 40% if adopted widely. That's not just a business success, that's environmental policy impact. I felt a flush of pride. I'd been so focused on the day-to-day operations that I hadn't fully grasped the broader implications of what we'd built. But what really fascinates me, Michael continued, is how you've managed to scale this operation while maintaining complete anonymity. Most entrepreneurs your age are all over social media, building personal brands. You don't even have a LinkedIn profile. I prefer to let the work speak for itself. Spoken like someone who's confident in our product. He leaned forward. Tell me about the early days. What made you think a craft store manager could revolutionize the packaging industry? For the next 2 hours, I walked him through my journey from the frustration with wasteful packaging at the craft store to the breakthrough with mycelium cultivation. Michael took notes constantly, occasionally asking technical questions that revealed how thoroughly he researched the industry. You mentioned patents, he said. How many do you hold now? 7 issued, 3 pending. The latest applications cover our expansion into medical packaging and food service applications. In international interest, we're finalizing licensing agreements in 6 countries. The European Union is particularly interested because our materials exceed their environmental standards by significant margins. Michael's eyes lit up. Can you quantify that? I pulled up our testing results on my laptop. Traditional biodegradable packaging requires industrial composting facilities and takes 6 to 12 months to break down completely. Our materials decompose in standard backyard compost within 90 days, and they actually improve soil quality. As they degrade? That's revolutionary, he said, typing rapidly. No wonder you've attracted international attention. The interview continued for another hour, covering everything from our revenue projections to my management philosophy. Michael asked about challenges, competition, and future growth plans with the thoroughness of someone who understood both business and environmental science. One last question, he said, as he packed up his materials. What drives you? What gets you up in the morning to run a company that's tackling problems most people don't even think about? I considered the question carefully. I think about the landfills full of packaging that will outlast my great-grandchildren. I think about the small business owners who want to be environmentally responsible but can't afford the existing green alternatives. I think about creating solutions that make sustainability accessible rather than elitist. Michael smiled. That's exactly the kind of vision Forbes readers want to hear about. After he left, I sat alone in my conference room, looking out at the production floor where my team was creating materials that would soon be featured in one of the world's most prestigious business magazines. Lisa knocked on my door. How did it go? I think it went well. He seemed genuinely impressed with what we've built. He should be. Ramona, do you realize what this Forbes feature means for the company? I was beginning to understand. The exposure would bring new clients, potential investors, and industry recognition that money couldn't buy. It would also make it impossible to maintain my secret any longer. When does the article come out? He said they're targeting the December issue. It hits newsstands in mid-November, November. That gave me a month to prepare Marcus and his family for the revelation that was coming. That evening, I found myself in our apartment bathroom, staring at my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked the same as the craft store manager who'd married Marcus 3 years ago. But everything else had changed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Norman, this is Sarah Chen from Pacific Packaging. Michael Patterson gave us your contact information. We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition offer for Eco Innovation Solutions. Would you be available for a call this week? Acquisition offer. Someone wanted to buy my company. I screenshot the message and forwarded it to my attorney, then sat down at my laptop to research Pacific Packaging. They were a $2 billion industrial packaging conglomerate with operations across North America and Asia. If they were interested in acquiring my company, that meant my little biodegradable packaging startup was worth far more than even I had realized. My phone rang. It was Michael Patterson. Ramona, I hope you don't mind me calling so late. I just wanted to give you a heads up. The editor loves your story. They're considering you for the cover of the CEO issue. The cover of Forbes magazine? I was speechless. The headline they're discussing is The Stealth CEO, How Ramona Norman Built a multi-million-dollar empire while no one was watching. Does that work for you? I thought about Eleanor's dismissive comments, Robert's patronizing lectures, and 3 years of being treated like Marcus's embarrassing secret. That works perfectly, I said. The Forbes photo shoot was scheduled for a Thursday morning in October, and I never felt more nervous in my life. Not because of the cameras or the national exposure, but because it would make my secret impossible to maintain. The photographer, an energetic woman named Carmen Rodriguez, had scouted our warehouse the week before and declared it perfect for the narrative we're building. We want to show the contrast, she explained as her crew set up elaborate lighting equipment, the humble industrial space where revolutionary ideas become reality. You'll be photographed among your products, with your team showing the human side of innovation. I'd carefully chosen my outfit, a navy blue blazer and crisp white shirt that looked professional without being flashy. Carmen laughed when she saw me. Honey, you're about to be on the cover of Forbes. We need to show some confidence here. She had her assistant bring in a selection of clothes from a local boutique, elegant pieces that cost more than I used to make in a week, but were now easily within my budget. Try the emerald green, Carmen suggested. It'll pop against the industrial background, and green suggests growth, sustainability, environmental awareness. The dress she handed me was sophisticated and powerful, cut to suggest success without being ostentatious. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I barely recognized, not the dismissed daughter-in-law or the craft store manager, but a CEO who belonged on magazine covers. The photo shoot lasted 4 hours. Carmen captured me reviewing patents with Dr. Santos, examining products on the production floor, and standing confidently in my office with charts showing our explosive growth in the background. Beautiful, she murmured as she reviewed the shots. On her camera, these tell the story of someone who's been quietly building an empire. The contrast between your modest presentation and the scope of your achievement is perfect. While Carmen and her crew packed up their equipment, I received a call from my attorney. Ramona, we need to discuss the Pacific Packaging acquisition offer. They've sent formal documentation. How much are they offering? $47 million for the company, plus performance bonuses that could bring the total to over $60 million. I nearly dropped my phone. $60 million for a company I'd started in my apartment kitchen less than 2 years ago. What do you think? I asked. I think you should consider it seriously, but I also think you're just getting started. This technology has applications we haven't even explored yet. Medical packaging, food preservation, agricultural applications. You could be looking at a billion-dollar company in 5 years. After the call, I sat in my office holding the formal offer from Pacific Packaging. $60 million would set me up for life, would prove conclusively to Marcus's family that I'd achieved something significant. But it would also mean giving up the company I'd built, the mission I believed in, the team I assembled. That evening, Marcus found me at our kitchen table, surrounded by financial documents and legal papers. What's all this? He asked. I looked at my husband, this man who was still adjusting to the reality of who I'd become. Someone wants to buy my company for $60 million. Marcus sat down heavily in the chair across from me. $60 million? Plus performance bonuses. It could go as high as $80 million if we hit certain milestones. He stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Ramona, do you realize what this means? It means I'm successful enough that major corporations want to acquire what I've built. No, I mean, he struggled for words. We could buy any house we want. We could travel anywhere, do anything. We'd never have to worry about money again. I studied his face, seeing the excitement there, but also something else, relief. As if my financial success could solve problems in our marriage that we hadn't even acknowledged. What if I don't want to sell? What do you mean? What if I want to keep building the company? What if I think we're just getting started? Marcus looked confused. But $60 million, Ramona. That's more money than we could spend in a lifetime. It's not about the money, Marcus. It's about the impact. We're solving real environmental problems. We're creating jobs, pioneering technology that could change how the world thinks about waste. He was quiet for a long moment. You've really thought about this, haven't you? This isn't just a business for you, it's your calling. Yes, and I need to know that you support that vision, even if it means turning down $60 million. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. 3 months ago, I thought you managed a craft store. Now you're turning down acquisition offers that would make us multimillionaires. I'm still catching up to who you really are. And how do you feel about who I really am? Proud, he said immediately. Intimidated, confused, amazed, but mostly proud. My wife is about to be on the cover of Forbes magazine, and she's considering turning down $60 million because she believes in her mission more than the money. I squeezed his hand. There's something else. Michael Patterson called today. The article comes out in 3 weeks. Your family is going to find out about everything. Marcus's expression grew serious. Are you ready for that? The question is, are you ready for that? Because once this story comes out, there's no going back to the way things were. Your family will have to acknowledge that they were completely wrong about me. Good, Marcus said firmly. Maybe it's time they learned that their judgment isn't infallible. Later that night, I sat in our home office reviewing the advance copy of my Forbes article that Michael had sent. The headline read, "The Stealth CEO, How Ramona Norman Built a Multi-Million-Dollar Empire While Everyone Was Looking the Other Way." The article was 6 pages long with detailed explanations of my technology, financial projections, and quotes from industry experts who called my work revolutionary and game-changing. There were photos of me in the emerald green dress, looking confident and successful against the backdrop of my bustling factory. But my favorite part was the sidebar that detailed the environmental impact of our packaging. The numbers were staggering. If adopted widely, our technology could reduce packaging waste in landfills by millions of tons annually while actually improving soil quality worldwide. This wasn't just a business success story. It was proof that one person with a good idea and stubborn determination could actually change the world. I thought about Eleanor's voice at that horrible November dinner. This ridiculous business pretense is embarrassing. In 3 weeks, the whole world would see exactly how embarrassing my business pretense really was. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly projections in my warehouse office. The Forbes article wasn't scheduled to hit newsstands for another week, but apparently word travels fast in business circles. Miss Norman? The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. This is Jennifer Walsh from Forbes magazine. I have Michael Patterson on the line as well. Hello, Jennifer. Michael. Ramona. Michael's voice is excited. I'm calling with news I've never had to deliver in 15 years of business journalism. The editorial board has selected your story for our cover feature, and it's generating unprecedented advance interest. Jennifer took over. We've received calls from 3 major television networks wanting to discuss interviews. The Wall Street Journal wants to do a follow-up piece. Harvard Business School wants to add your case study to their entrepreneurship curriculum. I sat down heavily in my chair. I haven't even seen the article yet. That's actually why we're calling. Michael sighed. The magazine hits stands Monday, but we wanted to give you advance notice. This story is going to change your life, Ramona. Are you prepared for that level of attention? I looked out my office window at the production floor, where my team was working steadily to fulfill orders that now totaled over $15 million for the quarter. Was I prepared for fame? For scrutiny? For the end of my carefully maintained anonymity? I think so, I said. There's one more thing, Jennifer added. We've gotten inquiries from several major corporations about potential partnerships or acquisitions. The Pacific packaging offer you mentioned to Michael? That's just the beginning. We're hearing numbers that could be significantly higher. After the call, I sat alone in my office for 20 minutes, trying to process what my life was about to become. The phone rang again almost immediately. Ramona, it's Patricia from the bank. I just got off a very interesting call. Oh, Goldman Sachs wants to schedule a meeting. Apparently, someone leaked information about your Forbes feature, and they're interested in discussing investment opportunities or potentially taking your company public. Public? That meant stock offerings, board meetings, shareholders. It meant transforming my mission-driven company into something accountable to investors who might not share my environmental values. How did Goldman Sachs find out about the Forbes article? In our business, information travels quickly. The important question is, what do you want to do about it? I thought about Eleanor's condescending smile, Robert's dismissive attitude. 3 years of being treated like Marcus's charity case. Schedule the meeting, I said. I want to understand all my options. That afternoon, as I was leaving the warehouse, my personal phone rang. The caller ID made my heart skip. Marcus's office number. Hey, honey, I answered. Ramona. His voice was strange, tight. I just got a very interesting call from my father. I stopped walking. What kind of call? Apparently, he was having lunch with a client who mentioned seeing advance copies of next week's Forbes magazine. The client was asking Robert if he knew that his daughter-in-law was featured on the cover. The moment I'd been dreading and anticipating for months had finally arrived. What did he say? He said there must be some mistake. That his daughter-in-law manages a craft store. Marcus paused. Ramona, he called me to ask if there was another Ramona Norman in the packaging business. I could picture Robert's face, the confusion, the dawning realization, the humiliation of discovering he'd been completely wrong about me. What did you tell him? I told him that my wife is about to be very famous and that maybe he should have paid better attention to who she really was. I smiled despite my nervousness. How did he take that? There was a very long silence. Then he asked if we could have dinner this weekend. All of us. He wants to discuss some things. I bet he does. Ramona, are you ready for this? Because once that magazine comes out, everything changes. Not just with my family, but everywhere. You're going to be recognized, interviewed, scrutinized. I thought about the scared young woman who'd stood at the edge of that wedding photo 3 years ago, pushed aside and dismissed. That woman had built something extraordinary while everyone was looking the other way. I'm ready, I said. When I got home that evening, I found a FedEx envelope waiting at our apartment door. Inside was an advance copy of Forbes magazine with my photo on the cover. I stared at the image myself in that emerald green dress, standing confidently in my warehouse, surrounded by the biodegradable packaging materials I'd invented. The headline was bold and unmistakable. The Stealth CEO, Ramona Norman's Secret Empire. Below the headline, in smaller text, how a dismissed craft store manager built a revolutionary $25 million company while her family wasn't paying attention. I opened to the feature article and read the opening paragraph. When Ramona Norman's in-laws dismissed her business ideas as ridiculous pretense, they had no idea they were witnessing the birth of a company that would revolutionize the packaging industry. While they saw a craft store manager playing with kitchen chemistry, Norman was quietly developing patents, securing multi-million-dollar contracts, and building a team of scientists who shared her vision of sustainable manufacturing. The article went on for 6 pages, detailing every aspect of my journey with a precision that made me proud and terrified in equal measure. Michael had captured not just the business success, but the personal cost of building something significant while being systematically underestimated. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Norman, this is Eleanor Whitman from Channel 7 News. We'd love to schedule an interview about your Forbes feature. Could you call me at your earliest convenience? Then another text, this one from Marcus. Just saw the magazine. Holy shit, Ramona. You look like you could run the world. I looked at my reflection in our hallway mirror, still holding the magazine. With my face on the cover, maybe I could run the world. But first, I had a family dinner to survive. The Forbes magazine hit newsstands on Monday morning, and by Tuesday, my life had become unrecognizable. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, business inquiries, and congratulations from people I hadn't spoken to in years. But the call that mattered most came at 7:23 a.m. on Wednesday. Ramona? Eleanor's voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. We need to talk. Good morning, Eleanor. Don't. Just don't. I could hear the fury she was trying to contain. I'm looking at a magazine with your face on the cover. Forbes magazine. Ramona, the headline says you built a $25 million company. Actually, the valuation is closer to $40 million now, but yes, the silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. You lying, manipulative. She caught herself. How long, what? How long have you been making fools of us? How long have you been sitting at our dinner table listening to us worry about your future while you were secretly running a business worth millions? I considered my answer carefully. I filed my first patent application 18 months ago. The company has been profitable for 14 months. 14 months. Her voice was getting higher. For over a year, you've let us believe you were a struggling craft store manager while you were building an empire behind our backs. I never lied about anything, Eleanor. You made assumptions, and I didn't correct them. You didn't correct them? Ramona, we offered to help you find better employment. Robert suggested internship programs for women trying to build careers. I recommended you for volunteer positions that might enhance your resume. The irony was so thick, I almost laughed. All very kind of you. Kind? It was humiliating. Do you have any idea how we look right now? Robert's partners are calling to congratulate him on his successful daughter-in-law. Our friends are asking why we never mentioned that Marcus married an entrepreneurial genius. And what are you telling them? What can we tell them? That we were too arrogant and dismissive to notice what was happening right in front of us? At least she was being honest. Eleanor, I understand you're upset. Upset? Her composure, finally, cracked completely. Ramona, I am mortified. Absolutely mortified. My bridge club is buzzing about how I failed to recognize the potential in my own daughter-in-law. Margaret Henderson called this morning to congratulate me on hiding such a treasure. Do you understand what you've done to us? I've succeeded. Beyond anyone's expectations, including my own. You've made us look like idiots. The raw pain in her voice caught me off guard. For 3 years, I'd seen Eleanor as my elegant, controlled tormentor. But listening to her now, I realized that her cruelty had been born from insecurity, fear that she might be wrong about me, about her own judgment, about her ability to protect her son's future. Eleanor, I said gently, you were idiots. You were protective parents who wanted the best for Marcus. You just didn't have all the information. We didn't have the information because you deliberately withheld it. I withheld it because every time I mentioned my business ideas, you treated them like delusions. You called my work embarrassing, ridiculous, pretentious. You made it clear that success from someone like me would somehow damage Marcus's reputation. Another long silence. The article, she said quietly, it quotes industry experts calling your work revolutionary. It says Harvard wants to study your business model. It says you turned down a $60 million acquisition offer. Yes. And you did this while we were. She couldn't finish the sentence. While you were telling me I wasn't good enough for your son. The admission hung between us like a confession. My other line beeped. The caller ID showed Robert's office number. Eleanor, your husband is calling. Should I take this call, or would you prefer to handle the family communication? Take it, she said quietly. We deserve whatever you have to say. I switched lines. Hello, Robert. Ramona. His voice was completely different from any conversation we'd ever had, respectful, almost formal. I hope you don't mind me calling directly. Not at all. I wanted to congratulate you on your remarkable achievement. The Forbes article is quite impressive. As if I'd won a small award rather than revolutionized an industry. Thank you. I also wanted to apologize. It's clear that Eleanor and I misjudged your capabilities. We should have been more supportive of your entrepreneurial pursuits. His lawyer training was showing careful words that acknowledged error without admitting fault. Robert, can I ask you something? Of course. If I had told you 18 months ago that I was developing biodegradable packaging technology and seeking patents, what would you have said? He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Honestly, I probably would have suggested you focus on more realistic goals. Because you thought I wasn't capable of success at that level? Because I thought, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I thought success in technology and manufacturing required connections and resources that you didn't have access to. But I did have access to them. Through hard work, innovation, and persistence. I just did it without your help or approval.
Yes, yes, you did.
His voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. Ramona, would you and Marcus be available for dinner this weekend? Eleanor and I would very much like to discuss this situation properly. Situation. As if my success was a problem to be managed rather than an achievement to be celebrated. I'll check with Marcus and let you know. After I hung up, I sat in my office looking at the pile of congratulatory messages, interview requests, and business proposals that had accumulated since the Forbes article came out. CNN wanted to feature me in a segment about women entrepreneurs. The Today Show wanted to discuss the environmental impact of my technology. 3 more companies had submitted acquisition offers, each higher than the last dot my assistant knocked. On the door, Ramona? There's a reporter from the local newspaper here. She wants to do a story about our hometown hero. Hometown hero! 3 days ago, I was the disappointing daughter-in-law who managed a craft store. Send her in, I said Dot as the reporter set up her recording equipment. I thought about Eleanor's voice on the phone, the humiliation, the wounded pride, the dawning realization that she'd been completely wrong about me. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt sad. But mostly I felt free. For the first time in 3 years. I didn't have to pretend to be smaller than I was. I didn't have to apologize for my ambitions or hide my achievements. The world now knew exactly who Ramona Norman was, and there was no going back. The phone calls started immediately after the Forbes article hit the internet. My personal cell phone, which had been blissfully quiet for 3 years of family dinners and awkward conversations, suddenly became the most popular number in the city. Eleanor called 6 times on Wednesday alone. Robert left 4 voicemails between his morning court appearance and lunch. Jessica, Marcus's sister, who had openly mocked my kitchen chemistry, sent a text at 11 p.m. Oh my God, Ramona. Had no idea, so proud to have you in the family. Can we catch up soon? I screenshot each message and forwarded them to Marcus with a simple note. Interesting how perspective changes. But it was the voicemails that truly revealed the desperation of their sudden interest. Ramona, darling, it's Eleanor. I was just telling the Hendersons about your wonderful success, and they're dying to hear more about your innovative packaging solutions. Could we perhaps arrange a small dinner party where you could share your expertise? I think it would be fascinating for our friends to meet such an accomplished entrepreneur. Delete. Ramona, Robert here. I've been speaking with several colleagues about environmental business law, and your company came up repeatedly. I'd love to discuss potential legal strategies for protecting your intellectual property. Perhaps we could meet for lunch this week. My treat, of course. Delete. Hey, Ramona! It's Jess. I just saw your Forbes cover and literally screamed. I've been bragging to everyone about my brilliant sister-in-law. We should totally do lunch and catch up. I have some friends who are really into sustainability and would love to meet you. Call me, I saved that one. Jessica's transformation from dismissive sister-in-law to enthusiastic supporter was so complete it deserved documentation. The most revealing call came Friday morning from Eleanor, her voice honey-sweet with manufactured warmth. Ramona, I hope you're not overwhelmed by all this attention. I've been fielding calls from friends and acquaintances who are simply fascinated by your story. The environmental club at the country club wants to invite you to speak at their next meeting. The charity auction committee thinks your company might make a wonderful corporate sponsor. Oh, and Robert's firm is hosting a client appreciation event next month. Several partners specifically requested that you attend. I could picture her taking items off a list, strategically positioning herself as the bridge between my newfound fame and the social circles she'd spent 3 years trying to protect from my influence. That's very thoughtful, Eleanor. But I'm quite busy with interview requests and business meetings right now. Of course. But Ramona, dear, I hope you understand that we're family. When one of us succeeds, we all benefit. Your achievements reflect wonderfully on Marcus's judgment, and by extension, on all of us. There it was. My success was now their success. My achievements somehow a reflection of their superior judgment rather than their spectacular failure to recognize talent. I'm not sure I follow, I said, though I understood perfectly. Well, naturally, people want to know. how we identified your potential so early. They're curious about how we supported your entrepreneurial journey. I've been telling everyone what a pleasure it's been to watch you develop your business acumen. I almost laughed. Eleanor was rewriting history in real time, transforming 3 years of condescension into a narrative of family support and encouragement. Eleanor, that's very generous of you, but I don't think that's quite accurate. Her voice tightened slightly.
What do you mean?
I mean that you didn't support my entrepreneurial journey. In fact, you actively discouraged it. You called my work embarrassing and suggested I focus on more appropriate activities like charity volunteering. Ramona, I think you may be misremembering. I have recordings. The silence was absolute. Recordings?
Of family dinners.
Of conversations where you and Robert dismissed my business ideas as delusions and suggested they were damaging to Marcus's career. Would you like me to refresh your memory? When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more careful. That's not necessary. Perhaps we could discuss this in person, at dinner this weekend. Perhaps. After I hung up, I sat in my office reviewing the phone log my assistant had compiled. 43 calls in 3 days from people who had previously shown no interest in my life or opinions. Business associates of Robert's who wanted to discuss potential collaborations. Friends of Eleanor's, who were suddenly fascinated by sustainable packaging. Social acquaintances who thought my company might be perfect for their charity events. The most pathetic call came from David Richardson, Jessica's husband, who had once loudly declared that environmental regulations were killing American business. Ramona, it's David. Just wanted to congratulate you on the Forbes thing. Really impressive stuff. Listen, I've been rethinking some of my positions on environmental business practices, and I'd love to pick your brain about how companies like yours are finding market opportunities in the green space. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime? I forwarded his voicemail to Marcus with a note. Your brother-in-law wants to pick my brain about green business opportunities. The same man who called environmental regulations hippie nonsense at last. Christmas dinner, Marcus called immediately. They're all calling you, aren't they? Constantly. Your mother wants to host dinner parties so I can share my expertise with her friends. Your father thinks I need legal advice for protecting my intellectual property. Jessica wants to introduce me to her sustainability-minded friends. Jesus. I'm sorry, Ramona. This must be incredibly frustrating. Actually, it's fascinating. I'm seeing exactly how quickly people can reframe their memories when it serves their interests.
What do you mean?
Your mother is telling people she always supported my business ventures. Your father claims he recognized my potential from the beginning. They're turning 3 years of dismissal into a story about family encouragement and wise guidance. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's really manipulative. It's human nature. They can't admit they were wrong, so they're changing the narrative to make themselves look prescient rather than foolish. Are you going to call them out on it? I looked at my phone, which was already lighting up with another call from Eleanor. I'm going to let them dig their hole a little deeper. First, I said, Sunday dinner should be very interesting. Sunday dinner felt like entering a parallel universe. The same dining room where I'd been systematically diminished for 3 years had been transformed into a shrine to my success. Eleanor had placed the Forbes magazine prominently on the sideboard, my cover photo facing the room like a reproach to their past behavior. Ramona, darling. Eleanor swept toward me as if greeting a beloved daughter, her arms outstretched for an embrace I'd never received before. You look absolutely radiant. Success suits you beautifully. I remained still, forcing her to navigate the awkward moment of an unreturned hug. Eleanor, Robert. I nodded to Marcus's father, who stood awkwardly by the fireplace, clearly uncertain how to approach the woman he'd spent years dismissing. Ramona, he said formally, extending his hand as if I were a business client rather than family. Congratulations on your remarkable achievement. Jessica bounced over with enthusiasm that felt both genuine and desperate. Ramona, I've been telling everyone about my incredibly talented sister-in-law. I always knew you were destined for great things. Did you? I asked mildly. That's interesting. Marcus squeezed my hand supportively as we took our seats. Notably, I was no longer relegated to the far end of the table, but positioned prominently next to Eleanor. I've taken the liberty of inviting a few friends who are dying to meet you, Eleanor said as she served dinner with unusual deference. Margaret Henderson, of course, and the Williamsons. They're all involved in environmental causes and are fascinated by your work. How thoughtful. Though I should mention that I've been quite selective about social commitments lately. My schedule has been rather intense since the Forbes article came out. Of course.
But surely you have.
Time for family and close friends, people who have supported you from the beginning. There it was, the rewriting of history I'd been expecting. Supported me from the beginning, I repeated carefully. Robert, do you remember supporting my business from the beginning? Robert shifted uncomfortably. Well, perhaps we weren't as encouraging as we might have been initially, but we always believed in your potential. That's fascinating, because I have a different recollection. Would you like me to refresh your memory? I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. The family exchanged nervous glances. Ramona, Eleanor said quickly, surely we don't need to dwell on past conversations. What matters is how proud we are of you now.
But I think context is important, don't you?
I pressed play on a recording from that devastating November dinner. Eleanor's voice filled the room, crystal clear. This ridiculous business pretense is embarrassing. What will people think when they hear that Marcus Norman's wife is peddling craft supplies door to door? The silence was deafening.
Eleanor's
face went white. I stopped the recording. Would you like to hear Robert's response? He said, and I quote, Ramona, you have no manufacturing experience, no business connections, no capital. This is pure delusion. Robert stared at his plate. Perhaps my choice of words was unfortunate. Unfortunate? My voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Robert, you told me I was delusional for believing I could build a manufacturing company. Eleanor, you said my work was embarrassing and that I was living in a fantasy while Marcus supported my little hobby. Jessica tried to intervene. But that was before we understood what you were really building. No, Jessica. That was before you bothered to ask what I was building. I never hid my work from any of you. I filed patents, secured contracts, hired employees. The information was available if you'd been interested enough to inquire. Eleanor found her voice. Ramona, we may have been cautious about encouraging what seemed like unrealistic expectations. Cautious? I smiled coldly. Is that what we're calling it? Eleanor, at the Henderson party, you called me lying. Manipulative bitch, and said I'd always be beneath this family, no matter how much money I made. Marcus straightened in his chair.
She said what?
Eleanor's eyes darted between Marcus and me. That conversation was taken out of context. What context justifies calling your daughter-in-law a manipulative bitch? The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Robert cleared his throat. Perhaps we can move forward rather than relitigating past conversations. I'm happy to move forward, Robert, but first, I need to understand what kind of relationship we're going to have going forward. What do you mean? I looked around the table at their expectant faces, people who had systematically undermined my confidence for 3 years and were now desperate to associate themselves with my success. I mean that for 3 years, you treated me like a charity case Marcus had inexplicably married. You dismissed my ideas, mocked my ambitions, and made it clear that I was an embarrassment to your family. Now that I've achieved success despite your opposition, you want to pretend you were supportive all along. Eleanor tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. You want to host dinner parties where I can share my expertise. You want to introduce me to your friends as evidence of your good judgment. You want to position yourselves as the wise mentors who recognized my potential. I leaned forward, my voice calm but implacable. But here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to acknowledge that you were wrong about me. Completely, spectacularly wrong. You're going to admit that your treatment of me was based on prejudice and arrogance, rather than careful assessment of my character or capabilities. Robert started to protest. Now see here. And you're going to apologize. Not for being cautious or using unfortunate word choices, but for 3 years of systematic disrespect and condescension toward a member of your family. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice barely audible. You're right. Everyone turned to stare at her. You're absolutely right, she continued, tears beginning to form in her eyes.
We were wrong? About you, completely wrong.
We were arrogant and dismissive, and we treated you terribly. Her composure cracked completely. I was so worried about Marcus marrying someone who didn't come from our world. I was protecting what I thought were his best interests, but I was really just protecting my own prejudices. Robert looked stricken as he watched his wife break down. Eleanor ... No, Robert, she's right about all of it. We owe her an apology that acknowledges the full extent of what we did. Eleanor looked directly at me, her face streaked with tears. Ramona, I am deeply, profoundly sorry. For every dismissive comment, every condescending smile, every moment we made you feel like you weren't good enough for our family. She took a shaky breath. You were always good enough. You were extraordinary, and we were too blind and arrogant to see it. Robert nodded slowly. I owe you the same apology, Ramona. We failed you as family members, and we failed Marcus by not supporting the woman he chose to marry. I looked at Marcus, who was staring at his parents with a mixture of pride and sadness. Thank you, I said quietly. That's what I needed to hear. The rest of dinner passed in subdued conversation, but something had fundamentally shifted. The balance of power in the family had changed permanently, and everyone understood it. As we prepared to leave, Eleanor pulled me aside. Ramona, I know this doesn't fix everything, but I want you to know that I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. Not because it reflects well on our family, but because you deserve recognition for your brilliance and determination. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. Instead, I saw genuine remorse and something that looked like respect. Thank you, Eleanor. That means more than you know. In the car on the way home, Marcus was quiet for several blocks before speaking. I'm sorry it took him so long to see who you really are. I'm sorry it took you so long, too. He reached for my hand. But we're here now, right? All of us finally seeing you clearly. I squeezed his fingers, thinking about the woman I'd been when I first sat at that dinner table, desperate. For their approval, she felt like a stranger now. Yes, I said. We're finally here. The morning after the confrontation at dinner, I woke to find Marcus sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a handwritten letter. His hair was disheveled, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd been awake most of the night. I couldn't sleep, he said without looking up. I kept thinking about everything that was said yesterday, everything my family put you through while I just ... Sat there. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him. Marcus, no, let me finish. He held up the letter. I wrote this at 3 a.m. because I needed to get my thoughts down clearly. He unfolded the pages, his hands slightly trembling. Dear Ramona, he began reading. I owe you an apology that's 3 years overdue. Not for failing to recognize your business potential, though I should have seen that too, but for failing to protect you from my family's treatment. His voice caught slightly. I sat at dinner tables and listened to them dismiss your dreams. I heard them mock your ambitions and call your work embarrassing. And instead of standing up for my wife, I told myself they'd come around eventually, because it was easier than confronting people I loved. I reached across the table, but he shook his head. Please, I need to read this whole thing. He continued. I enabled their behavior by staying silent. Worse, I sometimes found myself wondering if they might be right. When he talked about revolutionizing industries or developing new technologies, part of me thought you were being unrealistic. The admission hung between us like a confession. I didn't believe in you the way a husband should believe in his wife. I loved you, but I didn't fully respect your capabilities. I saw the woman I fell in love with, but I didn't see the CEO you were becoming. Marcus looked up from the letter, his eyes red-rimmed. The worst part is that you knew. You knew I wasn't really supporting you, which is why you built your empire in secret. You couldn't trust your own husband to be proud of your success.
Marcus, I'm not done.
He returned to the letter. When I learned about your company, my first emotion wasn't pride, it was embarrassment. Embarrassment that my wife had achieved something extraordinary while I was worried about mortgage payments and promotions. I felt diminished by your success, instead of elevated by it. The honesty was brutal and necessary. But watching you at dinner yesterday, seeing you demand the respect you deserve, I realized something important. You didn't build your company despite my family's opposition. You built it despite my failure to support you. You succeeded not because of the people who loved you, but in spite of them. Marcus folded the letter carefully. I want to be different going forward. I want to be the husband who celebrates your achievements instead of feeling threatened by them. I want to be the man who stands up to his family when they disrespect his wife. What does that look like practically? I asked gently.
It looks
like me finally choosing you over them when it matters. It looks like me being proud to be married to the CEO of the year instead of worried about how your success affects my career. He pulled a business card from his pocket.
I called a headhunter yesterday.
I'm exploring opportunities with firms that specialize in environmental law. If I'm going to be married to someone who's changing the world, maybe I should be doing work that matters too. I stared at the card. Marcus was considering leaving the prestigious law firm where he'd planned to make partner, abandoning the career path his family had mapped out for him. You don't have to change careers for me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for us. For the marriage I want us to have going forward. He reached across the table and took my hands. Ramona, I want to be worthy of you. I want our partnership to be based on mutual respect and shared values, not just love and habit.
And if your
family doesn't approve of these changes? Marcus's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Then they'll have to accept that their son is no longer available to enable their bad behavior. You've shown me what it looks like to stand up for your principles. It's time I learned how to do the same. Later that morning, Marcus called his parents while I was in the shower. I could hear his voice through the bathroom door firm, clear, uncompromising. When I emerged, he was sitting on our bed, looking both relieved and exhausted. How did that go? I asked. I told them that yesterday's apology was a good start, but it wasn't enough. I told them that going forward, any disrespect toward you would result in us limiting contact with them. How did they take it? Mom cried. Dad got defensive and said I was being manipulated by my successful wife. Marcus smiled grimly. I told him that if supporting my wife's achievements looked like manipulation to him, he might want to examine his own marriage. I sat beside him on the bed. Marcus, I don't want to be the reason you have conflict with your family.
You're not the reason.
Their behavior is the reason. You're just the person who finally forced all of us to confront the truth about how we've been operating. He turned to face me fully. Ramona, I need you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for building a successful company, but for having the strength to demand better treatment from all of us, including me. It wasn't easy. It shouldn't have been necessary. But I'm grateful you did it because it's made me a better husband and a better man. That evening, Marcus came home with a bottle of champagne in a small wrapped box. What's this for? It's for the woman who taught me what it means to believe in yourself when nobody else will. He handed me the box. It's also an apology gift that's about 3 years late. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a tree, its roots deep, its branches reaching toward the sky. The roots represent the foundation you built in secret, he explained as he fastened it around my neck. The branches represent all the growth still to come. I touched the pendant, feeling its weight against my chest. It's beautiful.
So are you, so is what you've built.
So is the marriage we're going to have going forward. As we toasted to new beginnings, I realized that Marcus's choice hadn't just been about supporting me over his family. It had been about choosing the man he wanted to be over the man he'd been raised to become. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like we were truly partners, two people building a life together based on mutual respect rather than comfortable. Assumptions thought it had taken a Forbes magazine cover and a family confrontation to get here, but maybe some transformations can only happen under pressure. Maybe some people need to see you succeed wildly before they can recognize your worth. And maybe some marriages need to be completely restructured before they can become what they were always meant to be. The Forbes CEO of the Year awards ceremony was held at the Ritz-Carlton in December, and for the first time in 3 years, I was attending a formal event where Marcus's family was genuinely proud to be associated with me. Eleanor had called twice to ask about the seating arrangements, not to complain about them, but to ensure she was positioned where photographers might capture her, supporting her accomplished daughter-in-law. The woman who had once pushed me to the edge of family photos was now angling to be included in my success story. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked as we got ready in our hotel room. He'd traded his conservative lawyer suits for something more contemporary. Charcoal gray tuxedo that made him look like the husband of a CEO rather than someone apologizing for his wife's presumptions. "Surprisingly, no," I said, adjusting the emerald green gown I'd chosen for the evening. "I keep waiting for imposter syndrome to kick in, but I feel like I belong here." "You do belong here. You've earned this." The ballroom was filled with the business elite CEOs whose companies I only read about, entrepreneurs whose innovations had shaped entire industries. A year ago, I would have felt overwhelmed by their presence. Tonight, I realized I was one of them. "Ramona!" A familiar voice called across the reception area. Margaret Henderson approached with genuine warmth, followed by several women I recognized from various social events where I'd previously been invisible. "Margaret, how lovely to see you." "My dear, you look absolutely radiant. I've been bragging to everyone about knowing you before you became famous." She gestured to her companions. "Ladies, this is the brilliant Ramona Norman I've been telling you about." The attention felt surreal but natural. These were the same social circles where Eleanor had once maneuvered to minimize my presence, but now I was the center of curious, respectful conversation. "Tell us about the environmental impact," one woman asked. "The Forbes article mentioned your packaging could reduce landfill waste by millions of tons." As I explained the technology and its applications, I noticed Eleanor approaching with Robert, both of them dressed impeccably and wearing expressions of careful pride. "Ramona, darling," Eleanor said, embracing me with what appeared to be genuine affection. "You look absolutely stunning." "That color is perfect on you." "Thank you, Eleanor." "You look lovely, too." Robert shook my hand formally. "We're very proud to be here tonight, Ramona. Very proud." The photographer from Forbes approached our group. "Miss Norman, we'd like to get some photos with your family before the ceremony begins." "Of course." I positioned myself in the center of the group with Marcus beside me and his parents flanking us. The photographer captured several shots, and I couldn't help but think about that wedding photo from 3 years ago. How? I'd been pushed to the margins while everyone else claimed the spotlight. "Beautiful family," the photographer commented. "You can see the support and love here." Eleanor beamed. "We've always known Ramona was destined for great things." I caught Marcus's eye and saw him fighting back a smile. His mother's revision of history had become so complete that she seemed to genuinely believe her own narrative. During the cocktail reception, I found myself in conversation with other honorees, a tech entrepreneur who'd revolutionized online education, a healthcare executive who'd made life-saving treatments accessible in developing countries, a renewable energy pioneer who'd figured out how to make solar power competitive with fossil fuels. "What I find most impressive about your story," said Dr. Sarafshan, the healthcare executive, "is how you built your company while maintaining complete operational security. Most of us are terrible at keeping our success quiet." I had good reasons for discretion. "Family issues?" she asked with knowing sympathy. "I've been there. Sometimes the people closest to us are the least equipped to handle our success." Before I could respond, the ceremony began. As we filed into the main ballroom, I noticed that our table was prominently positioned near the front, with perfect sightlines to the stage. Eleanor had somehow maneuvered herself into the seat directly to my right, while Robert sat across from us with clear access to photographers who might be documenting the evening, the master of ceremonies was a respected business journalist who introduced each honoree with detailed explanations of their achievements. When my name was called, I walked to the stage feeling confident and deserving of the recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's CEO of the Year, Ramona Norman, represents everything we celebrate in American entrepreneurship innovation: persistence, and vision that extends beyond profit to genuine societal impact. The applause was thunderous. From the stage, I could see Marcus clapping enthusiastically, his face glowing with pride. Eleanor was applauding while dabbing tears from her eyes with her napkin. Robert stood to applaud, his formal reserve replaced by what appeared to be genuine admiration. Ms. Norman's biodegradable packaging technology has already prevented an estimated 2 million pounds of waste from entering landfills this year alone. But perhaps more impressive than her environmental impact is her business acumen. She's built a $40 million company while maintaining the highest ethical and environmental standards. As I accepted the Crystal Award, I thought about the woman who'd sat in Eleanor's dining room 80 months ago, listening to lectures about realistic expectations and appropriate ambitions for someone in my position. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. "This recognition belongs not just to me, but to everyone who believes that business success and environmental responsibility aren't mutually exclusive. To my team at Eco Innovation Solutions, who share my vision of sustainable manufacturing. To my husband, Marcus, who learned to support dreams that were bigger than either of us initially understood." I paused, looking directly at Eleanor and Robert. "And to my family, who taught me that sometimes the most important validation comes from proving wrong the people who claim to know what you're capable of." The applause continued as I returned to my seat. Eleanor leaned over immediately. "That was beautifully said, darling. So gracious and inspiring." I studied her face, looking for signs of irony or self-awareness. Instead, I saw genuine pride in something that looked like maternal satisfaction, as if she were taking credit for my gracious acceptance speech. Later, during the networking portion of the evening, I found myself surrounded by business leaders wanting to discuss partnerships, licensing opportunities, and expansion strategies. Eleanor stayed close, introducing herself to anyone who would listen as Ramona's mother-in-law, and managing to work into every conversation how supportive the family has been of Ramona's entrepreneurial journey. Marcus appeared at my elbow. During a brief lull in conversations, "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "It's surreal. 6 months ago, your mother was telling people I managed a craft store. Tonight she's positioning herself as my biggest champion. Does it bother you?" I considered the question as I watched Eleanor animatedly discussing sustainable business practices with a group of executives, as if she'd been an environmental advocate for years rather than someone who dismissed my work as embarrassing fantasy. "Not the way I expected it to," I said finally. "I thought I'd feel angrier about the rewriting of history. Instead, I mostly feel free. Free how? Free from needing their approval. Free from caring whether they acknowledge their past behavior. Free to build whatever relationships I want with them going forward, based on who we all are now rather than who we were 3 years ago." A photographer approached us. "Mr. and Mrs. Norman? Forbes would like some photos of you together for the follow-up article." As we posed for pictures, Marcus's arm around my waist, both of us smiling genuinely, I realized that the evening represented more than professional recognition. It was the official end of one version of my life and the beginning of another. After the photographer finished, Robert approached us with 2 glasses of champagne. "A toast," he said formally, "to the most accomplished member of our family." I accepted the glass, noting how naturally he claimed me as family after 3 years of subtle suggestions that I didn't quite belong. "Robert, can I ask you something?" Of course." "Are you proud of me now because I've achieved success, or because you've finally recognized qualities that were always there?" He was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. "Both," he said finally. "I'm proud of your achievements, obviously, but I'm more ashamed of myself for failing to see your potential earlier. The qualities that built this company, intelligence, determination, vision, integrity, they were evident from the beginning. I was too prejudiced to recognize them. It was the most honest thing Robert had ever said to me. Eleanor joined our small circle. Having extracted herself from a conversation about environmental policy with what appeared to be some difficulty. Ramona, darling, I've just had the most interesting conversation with Senator Williams. He's very interested in your work and thinks there might be opportunities for federal environmental contracts. That's wonderful, Eleanor. Thank you for making the connection. She beamed at being useful, at having something valuable to contribute to my success rather than obstacles to overcome. As the evening wound down, the four of us found ourselves alone at our table while other guests mingled and networked around us. This has been quite a year, Marcus said, raising his glass. Quite 3 years, I corrected. Thinking about everything that had brought us to this moment, Eleanor reached across the table and took my hand. Ramona, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for the time we wasted, not seeing who you really were. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to hide your achievements from your own family. Eleanor, you don't need to keep apologizing. Yes, I do. Because I want you to understand that this, she gestured around the ballroom, this isn't what makes me proud of you. I'm proud of you for having the strength to demand better from all of us. I'm proud of you for building something meaningful while maintaining your integrity. I'm proud of you for not letting our small-mindedness make you small. Robert nodded. She's right. Tonight is wonderful, but what's more impressive is how you've handled success with grace and dignity, especially toward people who didn't deserve it. I looked around the table at these 3 people who had been such complicated figures in my life. Marcus, who'd learned to see me clearly and support my ambitions without feeling diminished by them. Eleanor, who'd transformed from my elegant tormentor into something approaching a champion. Robert, who'd moved from dismissive paternalism to genuine respect. You know what I'm most proud of? I said, I'm proud that I never let your doubts become my doubts. I'm proud that I built something meaningful while staying true to my values. And I'm proud that we've all grown enough to have this conversation. Honestly, Marcus squeezed my hand. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, we all echoed. Raising our glasses, as we walked out of the hotel that night past the photographers still capturing images of business leaders, past the networking conversations that would generate millions in new partnerships, past the recognition and validation I'd worked so hard to earn, I realized that the most valuable transformation hadn't been my business success. It had been learning to value myself, enough to demand better from the people who claimed to love. Emmy, the Forbes Award was wonderful, but the real victory was sitting in that hotel room later, removing my jewelry and makeup, knowing that I'd never again apologize for being more successful than people expected me to be. I was Ramona Norman, CEO of the year, and I was finally completely comfortable with exactly who that meant I was. 6 months after the Forbes ceremony, I sat in my expanded office overlooking a production facility that now employed 87 people and shipped biodegradable packaging to 32 countries. The company had grown beyond my wildest projections. But the most meaningful development wasn't financial, it was the letter I held in my hands. Dear Ms. Norman, it began. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm a 28-year-old engineer whose family thinks I'm wasting my time trying to start a renewable energy company. I read your Forbes article 5 times, and each time I felt like you were speaking directly to me. The letter continued for 3 pages, describing a brilliant young woman whose family dismissed her innovations as impractical dreams, while pressuring her to pursue more realistic career options. It ended with a simple request. Would you consider mentoring someone who understands what it feels like to be underestimated by the people who claim to love you? Sarah's letter was the 47th I'd received from women entrepreneurs who'd found inspiration in my story. Each one described similar patterns: families who couldn't see past their own limitations, partners who felt threatened by ambitious dreams, social circles that preferred women to remain predictably small. That afternoon, I called my attorney to discuss establishing the foundation I'd been planning for months. The Ramona Norman Foundation for Underestimated Entrepreneurs, I said, reviewing the mission statement we drafted. Our goal is to provide mentorship, funding, and strategic support for innovative business leaders whose potential has been dismissed by their personal networks. The initial funding commitment is substantial, my attorney noted. $10 million for the first 3 years of operation. It's the most important investment I'll ever make, I said. Success without purpose is just accumulation. The foundations. First cohort would include 12 entrepreneurs, women and men whose groundbreaking ideas had been met with skepticism or outright dismissal from family members, investors, or professional networks. We would provide not just financial support, but something more valuable, validation from people who understood what it meant to build something extraordinary while being systematically underestimated. That evening, Marcus found me in our home office, surrounded by applications from potential foundation recipients. "How many are you reviewing?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. 73 so far. The response has been overwhelming. He picked up one of the applications. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, biotechnology. Her family told her that medical research was too competitive for someone from her background. He shook his head. "It's like reading our story over and over again. Except these entrepreneurs won't have to build their companies in secret. They'll have support from people who believe in their potential from day one," Marcus smiled. "You know what I love most about this foundation? What? It's not just about business success. It's about changing the conversation around who gets to be ambitious, who deserves support, whose dreams are taken seriously." 6 weeks later, we held the foundation's inaugural event at our warehouse. The space had been transformed into an elegant venue, but I'd insisted on keeping the production equipment visible as a reminder that extraordinary things often emerge from humble beginnings. Eleanor had volunteered to help organize the event, approaching the task with the same meticulous attention she'd once devoted to excluding me from family conversations. Her transformation remained remarkable. She'd become genuinely passionate about supporting women entrepreneurs, as if championing my success had awakened something in her own ambitions. The catering is confirmed. The photographer knows to focus on the entrepreneurs rather than the donors, and I've arranged for local news coverage, she reported with the efficiency of a professional event coordinator. "Eleanor, you've outdone yourself." "Thank you." "Nonsense. This foundation represents everything I should have supported from the beginning. Consider this my penance and my privilege." Robert had surprised me by joining the foundation's advisory board, bringing his legal expertise to help entrepreneurs navigate intellectual property challenges and corporate structures. The man who'd once dismissed my patents as delusions now spent his weekends reviewing business plans and offering strategic guidance to inventors and innovators. The evening of the event, I stood before an audience of donors, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders, looking out at faces that represented hope and possibility. 18 months ago, I began. I was secretly developing revolutionary packaging technology while my family worried that I was embarrassing myself with unrealistic ambitions. Tonight, that technology prevents millions of pounds of waste from entering landfills annually, and our company has become a model for sustainable manufacturing. I paused, looking at Sarah Martinez in the front row, the young engineer whose letter had inspired the foundation. She'd been selected as our first mentorship recipient and was already developing partnerships with major utility companies. But the most important lesson I've learned isn't about business success or technological innovation. It's about the devastating cost of underestimating human potential and the transformative power of believing in someone's dreams, especially when those dreams seem impossible. The applause was warm and sustained, but I wasn't finished. Every entrepreneur in our inaugural cohort has been told their ideas are unrealistic, impractical, or inappropriate for someone of their background, gender, or experience level. Tonight, we're saying something different. We're saying that innovation comes from unexpected places, that brilliance doesn't always fit traditional patterns, and that the most revolutionary ideas often come from people who've been systematically overlooked. After my speech, I mingled with the entrepreneurs, donors, and supporters who gathered to launch this new chapter of my work. Each conversation reinforced my conviction that the foundation would create ripple effects far beyond the businesses. We supported Eleanor approached as the evening was winding down. "Ramona, this has been extraordinary. Watching you speak tonight, seeing the impact you're already having on these young entrepreneurs, I finally understand what we failed to see 3 years ago." "What's that?" "That your success was never about proving us wrong. It was about proving yourself right, about trusting your own vision when no one else would.
She was right.
The Forbes recognition, the company's growth, even the family's eventual acceptance, none of it had been as important as learning to believe in my own potential regardless of external validation. Later that night,
Marcus and I
stood on our apartment balcony, looking out at the city lights and reflecting on how dramatically our lives had changed. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you told me about the company from the beginning? He asked. Sometimes. But I think we needed to go through this journey separately before we could walk it together. You needed to learn to support dreams that were bigger than your comfort zone. I needed to learn that my worth wasn't dependent on other people's recognition. And now, I thought about the foundation, the entrepreneurs we'd support, the conversations we'd change about who deserves encouragement and investment. Now we get to help other people skip the part where they have to choose between their dreams and their relationships. We get to create a world where supporting someone's potential is the default response, not the exception. Marcus pulled me closer. I love being married to someone who's changing the world. I love being married to someone who's learned to change with it. As we headed inside, I caught my reflection in the sliding glass door woman who traveled from dismissed daughter-in-law to CEO of the year to founder of an organization dedicated to unleashing underestimated potential. The journey had required me to risk everything that felt safe and comfortable. It had demanded that I value my own vision above other people's limitations. It had cost me the approval I'd once craved and given me something infinitely more valuable, the knowledge that I could build something meaningful even when the people I loved couldn't see its worth. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Martinez. Ms. Norman, just signed our first major contract. Thank you for believing in impossible dreams and the people crazy enough to pursue them. I smiled, thinking about all the other Sarah Martinez's out there brilliant, DETERMINED people whose potential is being dismissed by families, partners, or communities that couldn't see past their own preconceptions. They wouldn't have to build their empires in secret. They would have support, mentorship, and most importantly, validation from people who understood that the most revolutionary ideas often come from the most unexpected sources. That was my real legacy, not the company I'd built or the recognition I'd earned, but the doors I'd opened for others to walk through confidently, knowing that someone believed their impossible dreams were not only possible, but essential. The girl who'd been pushed to the edge of family photos had found her way to the center of her own story, and now she was helping others do the same.